Hello everyone, Pillars TCG here, and today I'm bringing you a video on the current rulebook for Pillars. Now, the rulebook hasn't been prettied up yet. I'm still editing that in Photoshop, but this is just all the basic rules, and I'll be breaking them down in case anybody's interested on the current progress of the game. So, this is the overview. It essentially just says Pillars is a game for 2 or more players using customized deck. Lays out the 3 types of cards in the game: pillars, units, and tactics. And to win, you have to destroy all 4 of your opponent's pillars. So now let's break it down a bit more in depth. So the factions, the game has 5 factions. Well, technically 6. There are 5 major factions and then the mercenary faction, which is kind of the neutral one. Sort of like normal types in Pokemon, or artifacts in Magic. Sorry, it took me a bit to remember that. The 6 factions are Azar, and Azar is kind of the aggro faction. So you're constantly attacking your opponent and destroying your own units to power up your other units on the field and get more cards in your hand and things like that to just try to quickly overwhelm your opponent. Dallas, on the other hand, is focused more on getting tons of weaker creatures and getting them stronger. So if you want to focus on level 1 units and getting them stronger, then Dallas is the faction for you. Vitus is the control faction of the game. So this is life, so this would be your green faction. Azar is red, Dallas is blue, Vitus is green. So Vitus just controls the flow of the game and eventually tries to shift the match into their favor at the end. Karak is the desert faction. This will have yellow cards. They basically use tactic cards to their advantage for the most part. They try to counterattack your opponent as much as they can and just kind of build a victory off of what your opponent does, and kind of bend the rules to your advantage. Morvis is the death faction. These will have purple cards. So Morvis loves to void cards and use the discard pile. Void is removed from play. They remove cards from the game and then they use the discard pile. So basically they start off weak. So if they're playing like an Azar faction, they're at a disadvantage due to how aggro it is when they start. But towards the later end of the game, where they have so much in the discard pile to work with, Morvis is a very deadly faction. And then finally are the mercenary cards, which just supplement decks in many different ways. A lot of just good solid defense cards, strong stats, but they don't necessarily play very well together. There's not really a lot of archetypes in that faction compared to others. The card template, I do not have one on the dock, but it will contain the stat line, so it'll tell you whether a card is a unit, tactic, or pillar, or an ambusher strategy, and their power and defense. This also will tell you their archetype. Then it'll have the text box showing what abilities they have, their flavor text, as well as their faction and level. I have already made a video on the template which will show this, and then I'll have the set number and the artist. So I'm not going to go too in depth into this, even though there's a lot of text here, because I already have a video on the template which you can check out on my channel. The card types in the game are units. So your units are the main part of your game. They're your fighters. As it says, once they're played, they're either destroyed. They're on the field until they're either destroyed or another card removes them from the field. So they can attack and they can block, and their stats lays out which way to do it. So when they're first deployed, they cannot attack, like how Summoning Sickness works. Tactics are your support cards for the game, like a spell card in Yu-Gi-Oh! So as I said, they're kind of the foundation of strategy. While your units do all of the battling, these are what gets them stronger. And there are two different types. There are ambush, which are able to be played at any point during the game, even your opponent's turn. And then there are strategy, but strategies instead can only be played on your own turn outside of combat. So strategy cards are more like the cards that will let you draw or look through your discard pile, while ambush are the cards that will help you out in battle, such as decreasing something's stats or increasing it. Then pillars, as I said, pillar cards are the foundation of the entire game. So there are three things, and this is what as I was saying, the entire game is built on pillars. They are the player's life, they are the field effects of the game, and they're the cost to play the cards. So they have game-changing effects, but they're constantly targeted by your opponent. And also, you cannot play tactic or unit cards of a faction if you do not have a pillar of that faction in play. Meaning, if you're running a Morvis deck, at the start of the game, you declare that, and all of your pillars are Morvis pillars. But if you have some Vitus cards in your deck to try to control the flow of the game until you can build up the discard pile for those Morvis cards, you must play a Vitus pillar in order to play those cards. And we'll get into how to play these things in a bit. So the basic zones of the game are the deck. Every player obviously has a deck like regular TCGs. They have their hand and then the field of play, so usually just the field, the discard pile, and the void. So this is a very basic setup. Now let's move on to the foundation of the game. So this is the fundamentals on how to play. So this is going to go more in depth. So pillar cards. So you start with all four pillars, as I said, and the goal of the game is to target the pillars. So basically, when you attack, and this will go into more of this later, but you declare a pillar, and if they do not block it, or if you get through everything, or if they cannot block it, then their pillar is destroyed. Which means if they have any effects boosted from the pillar, that is gone. They only have 3 more zones. If they had a card that let them play cards of another faction on it, that is also gone. So deciding which one to attack is key. As I said, they also have game-changing effects, such as boosting the stats of your own cards, or even altering some of the rules of the game, such as expanding the amount of cards you can have on your field, or decreasing the amount of cards that can attack per turn. But yeah, you do need to choose wisely as to what cards you play, as there are only 4 slots available the entire game, and these slots only go down as the game goes on, and they get destroyed. And then I've already gone over what they can play, but also mercenaries are an exception. That is a big part of their faction, is they can be played no matter what pillars are on the field. And just in case this confuses anyone, the pillars only affect the cards on your field. So if you have a Vitus pillar, your opponent still cannot play Vitus cards, just you. So playing cards, this goes into a lot of the core mechanics of the game. So after the draw phase, you have 2 actions, and you can do one of 4 things. You can play a unit, level up a unit, play a pillar, or level up a pillar. So leveling up is when you place a card of the same faction but 1 level higher on top of it. So I do not have the pictures in here, but if you had a level 1 Novice Flame Mage, which is an Azar unit, and then you have a level 2 Flaming Fish, which is also an Azar unit, you can play it on top of the card, and then Novice Flame Mage is essentially not in the game, it is just Flaming Fish in its place. Then actions may be used during any phase of the player's turn, but they're only available on that player's turn and do not transfer from one turn to the next. Additionally, players may use any number of actions as they please of their actions. So if you don't want to use any, or if you only want to use one, but they don't, you can't stack up. The other type of the card, the tactics, they do not need so tactics do not take actions. You can play as many as you want. Okay, this is just a typo. It should be strategy cards, not operation cards, I believe. Operations are a different type of card that is not yet introduced. Now, attacking and blocking, this works very similar to how Magic the Gathering works. So in pillars, attacking works by attacking a pillar during their combat phase and declaring which of the opponent's pillars they are targeting. This is the only pillar that may be attacked that turn, so you cannot defeat someone in one turn. You must, it will take 4 at a minimum. Afterwards, the player is able to attack with any of their available units. They attack one by one and do not need to be declared at the same time. After an attack is resolved, if the attacking unit survives, it is then used, and used means it is tapped. So this is an important distinction compared to other games. You can attack one at a time. So if they counter your first one, you may not want to attack because it's ruins your strategy, and the rest of your cards are fine. When used attacking, the player under attack may choose to defend. When a player defends, they choose one of their units they want to become the target of the attack instead of the pillar. Both units then deal damage to each other based on their power and defense. If one unit has more power than the opposing unit's defense, it is destroyed. So, example, a 600-200 attacks, a 100-400 defends, the defending is destroyed. If the stat line is reversed, however, the attacking unit would be destroyed. So basically, if this guy only has 200, so if a card with 400 power was defending, they would still destroy the attacking unit. Essentially, their stat lines are just pitted against each other. And the defending unit does not have to tap. So building a deck, of course, the best part about pillars is deck building, like any TCG. So a deck must contain a minimum of 40 cards and a maximum of 60 cards. And players may only have 4 copies of the same card per deck. Everything else is fine. These are just tips for deck building. A deck should have enough pillars that each slot may be upgraded to level 3, because as I said, you can also level up your pillar cards. And this also ensures that every faction in your deck may be played with ease, but the problem is, as you only have 4 slots, you do not want to clog up your hand. So you need to be thinking, right, I want to have different options of pillars to play, but once you have played a level 2 on every single pillar, any other level 2s in your decks are null and void throughout the rest of the game unless a card removes them from your slot. So you have to be wary of that. So units are the main focal point of most decks. I'm sure you can build decks without it as the focal point. But you need to have, kind of like in Pokemon, you'd want a large number of level 1s, medium number of level 2s, and a small number of level 3s. Because level 3s, like pillar cards, can just clutter up the hand in the deck. Because it takes a bit to be able to have them on the field. So tactics are incredibly strong, because they allow you to very quickly change the game. And also, this is just a rule in general. If a card is in conflict with the rules, the card always wins. So if a pillar allows 6 units on the battlefield instead of 4, then the rules are meant to allow that. Going into the gameplay, at the start of the game, shuffle your deck, and place the top 4 cards face down in single stacks. So those are your pillars. Then you each draw 5 cards to your hand. So in your draw phase, you draw 2 cards from the top of your deck. If you go first, you only draw 1, and the second play. But only for your first turn. So as opposed to some other games in Pillars, you draw 2 cards each turn. On the main phase, this is when you're able to play your cards where your 2 actions matter. Then you have your combat phase where you can attack, and the only cards that can be played are ambush, and they can be played by either player. And then the main phase is the same as the other main phase, as you could attack, your attack could fail, but you haven't played any actions, so you want to take advantage of that and play your 2 actions later. And then the end phase, you need to count the number of cards in your hand. If it's over 10, you must discard until there are 10. Because as I said, you draw 2 cards per turn, so you can easily hit that limit. And additionally, if a player runs out of cards in their deck, their discard pile is shuffled and replaced in their deck zone as their new deck. And this may be repeated unlimited times per game, so cycling through your deck could be a legitimate strategy. And then here is just a glossary of all of the abilities in the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed. This is the rules of my trading card game Pillars. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video.